Hey everyone, excited to be with you on a brand new week for me at least when it comes to sharing fascinating content. I have to ask you a question. What happens when we all stop behind these screens? Well, now when distance doesn't matter, I guess we can work for wherever we want, right? Well, not so fast, as I discussed in a recent New York Post article. Companies like Facebook and Twitter are now requiring staff to disclose their zip or postcodes because, as they say, the area you live in will determine your degree of salary. Really? So, for example, an employee at, let's say, Palo Alto, California, headquarters at, let's say, VMware, who decides to permanently move to Denver and work there remotely, face an 80% salary reduction, according to a new Bloomberg report. In fact, a long list of Silicon Valley companies are now considering salary adjustments for remote work employees who relocate to less expensive parts of the country or the world, the report states. Common sense, anyone? Just asking. So what do they do to get around that? Of course, these companies now are considering employing spies, which are going around figuring out where do you really live, so that Golden Gate Bridge backdrop you installed very cleverly to make sure that everyone would believe you're sitting there in San Francisco is no longer enough. Now, the world has really turned mad, hasn't it? Okay, so here's my question. It's all possible that things will change quite a lot right now. I mean, company cultures are completely collapsing, in my opinion, while we all work remotely. And with that, whatever loyalty one may have working for a company, I think is now disappearing because people, I think, have realized there is no such thing as a lifetime job. It's kind of a naive dream. So now when distance doesn't matter and you are only one link away from a new job, one quickly could be thinking, why not have 2 links or 3 links, meaning 2 or 3 employers out there? And with that, I guess the straightforward question is, how do you drive traffic? Which leads me to this week's topic. Well, by building your own brand, of course, is the answer. I just spoke with a journalist, by the way, from Reference News, and I'm sure you may not have heard about Reference News. It is, in fact, the newspaper with the largest circulation in the world. It's a Chinese paper, of course. And the journalist told me that the hot topic this year in China is, in fact, building your personal brand. It is to create, as the journalist told me, a lifetime safety net. So how on earth do you build a personal brand? Well, I did an experiment some time ago in partnership with NBC, and I wanted to create a personal brand just for fun. And I'm going to warn you, it actually was pretty fun. And everything you're going to see right now is true. And I'm swearing it is true what you're seeing. Take a look at this.
Today Show, Krista.
As a Today Show producer, Krista Brunson is used to juggling a number of assignments.
Okay, well, how about if we reschedule?
But branding and marketing expert Martin Lindstrom has come up with what could be Krista's most challenging assignment yet. To help, he enlisted Today Show and Us Weekly magazine contributor Jill Martin.
What we have to do is we have to create a celebrity in 2 hours.
I love this cast. All right, but we don't want her to look like Lady Gaga, right?
No, you want to go 50% down the track of a Lady Gaga, but not the full way, I can tell you.
We'll just do the lady.
Absolutely.
Leave out the Gaga. You ready for a new Krista? I'm ready. Okay, let's go.
Krista's transformation was underway with hair, makeup, and wardrobe, just like a real celebrity. Meanwhile, with the help of some willing NBC staffers, Krista's entourage was assembled. A manager, stylist, bodyguard, even fake paparazzi, and of course, the requisite blinged out pooch. This is Zach.
You look unbelievable.
In order for this to work, Krista had to stay in character the whole time. And boy, did she.
If we do lunch, I'd like to have a mimosa, and I'd like to bring marguerites. So can you put it on the schedule?
Krista, over here. Krista, look over here. How you doing today?
Yeah, I'm just doing a little shopping, folks, okay?
Krista, right over here. What are you doing for the Super Bowl, Krista? Come on, Krista, please just look this way 1 second. Please, thank you. All right, I think enough, guys. Come on, she signed off.
It didn't take long for people to approach Krista.
Hi. Oh, absolutely. Lovely hat. Oh, absolutely. Thanks. Okay.
But that doesn't mean they actually knew her.
She kind of looks like somebody important.
So why did you approach her?
Well, because this is New York and you always see fun people on the street, and well, why not?
She looks really familiar, so I figured if I could get her autograph, I'd be able to read it, but I still can't read it.
You can't read it.
I heard that her name is Krista, but everybody was asking for an autograph, so I figured I'd get one for my daughter as well.
Who is that?
But you took a photo.
It looks like Jessica Simpson. Is it her?
While not everyone was buying it,
You know Krista? No, I don't know Krista.
others just wanted more information.
Would you give me a name?
Krista.
Krista who?
Krista, that's her name. Like Madonna, you have Krista.
I'm on a show that hasn't premiered yet, but it's an up and coming. You'll see soon.
What should I be looking for? What name?
Krista, that's the name.
But in the end, she took the photo anyway, just in case.
3, 2, 1.
That was the story about Krista. And actually, I spoke to Krista the other day, and she told me that still today, many years later, people are still coming up to her and asking her for autographs. It's crazy, right? It really is crazy. But this is, I think, the concept of personal branding. Of course, this is an extreme version. We did not cheat. I want to say this is true. But I also want to say it probably takes a little bit more than me running around with NBC for half a day to do some funny shootings. And that's the reason why I couldn't think of a better person to join me on today's show, which is Dorie Clark. Dorie has been named one of the top 50 thinkers in the world by Thinkers 50 and was recognized as the #1 communication coach in the world by Marshall Goldsmith, a leading global coach award. Now, Dorie also is a consultant and keynote speaker, teaches executive education at Duke University. And Dorie, I apologize because I have to recall a name here, which is crazy. It's Duke University Fuqua School. You had to be a bit drunk to say that, or something like that, of business, and Columbia Business School, of course. And she is the author of Entrepreneurial You, Reinventing You, and Stand Out, which was named the #1 leadership book by Inc. magazine some time ago. Now, I have to tell you one thing. Before I bring Dorie on the stage, the virtual stage, I actually want to go to Lugano instead. It's much more fun to be traveling. Dorie and I just talked about that. And I want to share with you a little thought-provoking insight she shared in Lugano at the TEDx conference about her experience taking place the 10th of September. Take a look at this.
One day, I got called into the HR office, and I thought they were going to be changing our dental plan, but it didn't turn out that way. That afternoon, I left the office without a job. It was a Monday afternoon, and I had been laid off. I went home that night, and I was scared. I didn't know how I was going to support myself, but I thought, all right, I'm going to wake up the next morning and I'll figure it out. I'll go look for another job. And the only problem was it didn't quite turn out that way. The next morning, I woke up, I turned on the television. It turned out that the day that I had been laid off was Monday, September 10th, 2001. The next morning, the world changed. Planes stopped flying, the stock market stopped trading. The least of anyone's problems that day was an out-of-work newspaper reporter. They'd given me 1 week's severance pay. Technically, I had worked Monday, so it was actually 4 days severance pay. And I had to figure something out. And I did. But that moment made me vow that I was never going to let myself become that vulnerable in such a precarious position again. And I haven't.
Dorie, it's so good to have you with me. Thank you for joining me.
Martin, it is so good to be here. And wow, I loved watching your Krista clip. You are a genius. I'm awaiting my makeover and blowout. So
I'm
now that I
selling
know you have
autographs
these
as well, in
skills.
case you want it. Listen, I have to say one thing with Dorie. You have the most amazing personality I've seen any person have, and I think I told you that the first time we met. Now, some years ago. Give me a sense of how much do you think your extreme ability to connect with people and really just be there, be present all the time has helped you since the 10th of September back then and until now? Is that sort of 80% of the secret, or what is it?
Oh, well, first of all, you're very kind. Thank you. I think that to sort of tap into what you're talking about, for me, I am a sort of optimistic, positive person in general, but I think part of what undergirds that is a commitment to the belief that no matter what, under no circumstances do I ever want to be in a position where I am forced to be doing things I don't want to do and working with people I don't want to work with. And the fact that I've been able to stand firm in that enables me to really just go all in and be present and be happy working, with and socializing with the great people that I do. What enables that is actually some pretty boring structural things, like making sure that I am almost obsessive about cash reserves and liquidity and living below my means, so that I never find myself in a position where I have to compromise on things that are important to me.
Well, I think I should learn from you on that one. Listen, before we move on, I just want to say hello to a lot of amazing people out there. I want to say hello to Shelley, Kahif, Moses, Natalia, Irma, Tanya, Linda, Jilly, then I'm going to say Leo from Mexico, Tien and Vivian from Denmark. We have people from Mumbai, New York, Spain, and from the Bay Area as well. Thanks everyone for joining me. And by the way, if you have any questions, drop me a note and say hello, and I will ask Dorie on your behalf. And Dorie, I just want to pick up on a beautiful quote you created some time ago, which I love. The quote is, your personal brand is what other people say about you when you leave the room. It's your professional reputation. What do people say about you when you leave the room?
About me personally, I actually had an interesting experience with this, because about 10 years ago, I was relatively new in my business. I'd worked for myself for about 3 years, and I decided it was time to amp up my marketing a little bit. So I actually hired a videographer to go interview my clients about what it was like to work with me, so I could create videos to put on my website. And I wasn't sure what people would say. I just really had no idea. And I think for most of us, we don't really know. I thought they'd say, oh, Dorie's smart, Dorie's competent, the reasons that you hire someone to do marketing or branding work for you. What I actually heard that was most surprising, which really made an impact on me, is that the clients often said, Dorie is really fun to work with. And I thought, we think we're selling one thing. And of course, that's table stakes. You have to be good at what you're doing. But what is so important that we often don't think about is that people really want to work with people that they like.
Yeah. And it's fascinating because you were then seeing the world from another point of view. I mean, a lot of you guys watching right now know how obsessed I am with empathy, the ability to put yourself in the shoes of another person. What really sounds like what you're picking up here is that it became clear for you what your strengths were, because you never asked yourself that question. At least maybe you have, but you're too blind, right, to be able to see the forest for just trees, right?
Yeah, one of the things that I've really come to realize, Martin, through writing my books, including Reinventing You, is, we all think we know ourselves reasonably well. And at a broad level, we do, right? I mean, for most people, if you're a quiet person, you know that. You're not, oh yeah, I'm the life of the party, right? You have a reasonable understanding. But the problem comes from the fact that actually we know too much about ourselves. Yeah. It's not that we don't know ourselves. We know too many things, and there is too much noise for us to pick out the signals. And so where we need other people, and where it becomes really important to get that external perspective, is to understand what actually is most important here, what actually is really coming through to others.
Yeah. I want to tap into one of the things I remember you worked on, which is the recognized expert framework, which breaks down the key components of what it takes to become a recognized expert in one's field. And remember, from top of mind is something like content creation, social proof, and network, or something like that. Maybe I'm wrong here, but that's at least what I remember from your model. Before I ask you about that question, I want to go back in time just for a second and play a little soundbite from you on stage, dressed up to kill, I have to say, and just hear your reflections of this comment here. Take a look at this.
Number one is the importance of not just emphasizing, but over-indexing on networking early on in your career. And here's what I mean by that. We all know networking is important. I'm sure that in your various courses and career services moments, people say, yes, network. That's how you get jobs. That's how you advance. But the problem and the reason that a lot of people don't like networking, that they shy away from it, is that when you expect quick results from it, when the implicit idea is that you meet someone and 5 minutes later you get something from them, you get a job, you get a referral, you get a transaction, that leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. What's really important is that building a network is nothing more and nothing less than building relationships over time. And the people that you have met here in your time at Mary Baldwin are going to be the core of your network for years to come in unexpected ways. The good news is that thanks to social media, for all its flaws, you have the ability to stay in ambient touch with people that you maybe only know peripherally. And years later, they can become extraordinarily valuable. For me, back when I was a presidential campaign spokesperson, there was a guy that I met who at the time was a reporter for a weekly newspaper. Now, I was working for the candidate. I was the gatekeeper for the candidate. And he worked for a newspaper. I kid you not, it was named The Hippo. So it may have been a little counterintuitive that I gave him time with our presidential candidate, but I liked him. I thought he would do a good job. And frankly, I thought he needed a break. And it was true. After he got to interview my candidate, all the other candidates gave him interviews, and it made a big difference. What I didn't know and couldn't predict was that 11 years later, after losing touch, I would be browsing in a bookstore. I would see his name on the cover of a book, and I reached out to him and sent him an email. It was the same guy. We got back in touch, and he ultimately brought me in to be a consultant for a multi-billion-dollar Silicon Valley company that he was advising. You never know where people will end up. And staying in touch, keeping up the connections that you have made here in your years at Mary Baldwin can be invaluable down the road. It's about the long term.
Dorie, I honestly don't think I can think of anyone better at networking than you are. And I want to just talk about that for a second, because I come from Denmark originally. And in Denmark, we are horrible at networking because we have something called the gender law, which is a law, unspoken law, basically saying that, hey, you should not think you're something special. And if you do, you're wrong. Which is a really nice start in life to start that way. So here's the issue. When you're networking, you kind of have to be slightly self-confident. And if there's one person I can think of, which really is that in a humble bragging way, or just in the humble way, it probably is you. Tell me, what is your advice, first of all, to spread the word and build up a network? Because if there's one person who can do it, it certainly is you.
Well, thank you, Martin. This is great. And I had no idea there was going to be such a multimedia Dorie Clark blitz. I feel like, it's like a This Is Your Life episode. So it's like, oh my goodness, all the things here. What I would say about networking, we all know, we all have heard the conventional wisdom, lead with value, help people first. That is true. But of course, when it's framed that way, it seems awfully simplistic. It seems awfully trite. I think that there's actually two components that are necessary here. The first, of course, it is true that in networking, what is wrong with it when we paint a caricature of networking is, on one hand, it's the people who are just always out to get something in a predatory way. We don't want to be like that, obviously. But if we think about, helping people, learning about them, it's so much better and so much more effective to come in and ask questions, learn about who they are so you can actually think through what would be genuinely useful to them. And it could be introductions, that could be referrals to service providers, it could be, it's just sending them articles, whatever it is. That's good, but it's also not sufficient. What we need to balance it with is making sure, because then they just think, oh, well, you're a nice person, that's great, but they don't know anything about you. We need to do two things simultaneously, which is be nice, be helpful, be interested, be kind, but also make sure that in small ways, we're actually making the person aware of what we do, so that it's not just, oh, she's nice, but, oh, she's nice and she actually has this amazing skill set. Gosh, I should probably refer her to someone down the road. When you plant those seeds, you don't have to be aggressive. You don't have to be like, so Martin, give me 3 names, because Martin already wants to help because he likes you and he knows what you're good at.
So do you run sort of a huge Dorie's database of people where there's reminders popping up? Now I have to do that, and I have to reach out to that person. I haven't spoken to him for 5 months. Or is it? How do you do this?
I do not actually maintain a CRM, a customer relationship management software or anything like that. Maybe I should, but actually the kind of networking that I like best, and I feel like is perhaps most authentic and organic, is that I just try to be really present in the moment, such that if someone pops into my head, I don't let that pass. I do something about it. And so it's really a question of just looking for the signals in my environment where, if I'm passing by a coffee shop that I don't go to regularly, but I say, oh, I remember when Martin and I had coffee there 2 years ago. I'm going to send you a picture. I'm going to send you an email and say, hey, Martin, I'm thinking about you. I miss you. You do that, or you see some trigger. And if the person comes to your mind, for most of us, we leave it in our mind. We shouldn't do that. The way that we can actually stay in touch with people in a really authentic way is to let them know when we think about them and reach out. And it just helps keep the relationship going.
Who would you say you met over the years which have had a profound impact on you in terms of their ability to do exactly what you're preaching right now?
Well, it's interesting. I have a good friend, actually a close friend of mine. He is the person to whom I dedicated this book, my second book, Stand Out. And he has always been really sort of a role model for this. He would use his sort of spare time. He literally did it today, which is why I'm thinking about him. Like when he is traveling or, just some downtime, he sends text messages to people. And I wouldn't have heard from him for a while, but just out of the blue, he's like, hey, just checking in. How are you doing? How's life? And just to see that you're on someone's mind, he uses his interstitial moments in better ways than most of us do. Most people just check Facebook or they do whatever. He's proactively sending messages to people and saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. I care about you. That's an incredibly valuable use of your time. And it's helped us maintain a really good friendship despite not living in the same city for probably 15 years.
Yeah. And I think we're getting to that point. I remember in one of the feedback notes you sent to me prior to us jumping online right now, you saying that distance relationships is going to be the new commodity, right? So we're going to get used to that idea of constantly nudging each other or sending signals to each other, even though we may not pass by each other physically every day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the more that we get comfortable with virtual environments, the more it sort of becomes irrelevant where people are. I mean, ultimately, if we think about romantic relationships, it used to be, oh, what a hassle, how terrible to have a long distance relationship. And you'd only have a long distance relationship because maybe you met when someone was on a business trip and then, oh, okay, you meet in person and you keep up the relationship. Now it is, as we're on lockdown, it is literally immaterial if you are in New York City where I am, or if you're in Switzerland, because the net is the same. I am seeing you this way. And so it really evens the playing field for any of these things. I'm actually curious, Martin, I'd love to hear about what your social life and your networking has been like over the past year that you have been grounded. How have you kept up your personal and your professional relationships?
I think what I've done as the number one thing is to try to combine two ordinary things in a new way. So one of the philosophies I've had, and you may be familiar with it, is the idea of that I'm the branding guy, but I'm also combining branding with a new thing in an unexpected way. And by doing that, it adds a new twist or a new flavor to something which may be very recognizable and very old-fashioned, but suddenly becomes very fresh. And in doing so, I've used this, and I always use that as an excuse to reach out to people I normally would never talk with. So over the last year, I've spoken with perhaps 100 or 200 people in a completely new context about a topic I never would talk to them about, and established a whole new knowledge base. And I try to, normally I'm illustrating this by having a circle in the middle saying branding, but then I have on the periphery a lot of other circles around it. And whenever I move into those new spaces of expertise, it puts another perspective to my life and to my brand and to who I am. And once you see the same thing from not one point of view, but from multiple point of views, it just becomes a much more fulfilling conversation. So I'm trying to force myself out of my usual space, my comfort zone, because I think you can very quickly fall asleep. Don't you have the same feeling sometimes, or is it just me, perhaps?
No, I think it's really true. And one of the things that I really admire about you is the breadth of your expertise, and I think which contributes in a material way to the quality of insights that you have. One thing I was actually curious about, you came out with an ebook, Martin, like 5 minutes into COVID, about biology for a coronavirus world. It had like 1 million downloads or something crazy like that. And all I could think is, how did Martin write this so fast? I mean, this was not like a 5-page thing that you dashed off in your sleep. This was this, very thoughtful, elaborate take on the crisis, written almost in real time. How did you come up with the idea to do that, and how were you able to execute that quickly?
Well, thank you for saying that. Well, listen, I have something I call the water moment. It's where I'm thinking. So I'm thinking when I'm swimming, and I was swimming in Sydney Harbour, and every morning I was going back and forth. And as I'm swimming and thinking, I always come up with new concept ideas. And I said to myself, why don't I write a new article every day? And when I've written 30 articles, it's become a new book. And that's really what I did. So it was not like I sat down and wrote a book. I wrote 30 articles, and I then basically distributed them in the lead up to, adjusted it, and combined them into one big narrative. But here's what I've learned. Fascinating stuff. I took brand equity from my previous book. So I've written a book many years ago called Biology, B-U-Y-ology. And I took that brand, and I shouldn't say this live, but I'm saying it. I didn't ask my publishing house for permission to use that brand again. I said, I'm just going to do it anyway, right? So I basically took biology. I call it the biology for coronavirus world. So I used that existing brand equity and slapped it on top of it, because really it fit very well onto that topic. That was the first thing. The second thing I did was, it gave me a really good excuse to knock on doors where I normally couldn't knock on doors, mainly because when you need to have something to say to people, you can't just say, hello, why do you want to write about me or talk with me? So it gave me a really good excuse in a period where everyone was under pressure to say something fresh and new, where everyone was really desperate to learn something, right? And find out what is going to happen with this stuff. That was the second thing I learned. The timing is really essential. And the third thing I really learned from this was that as I published it, I just went the full Monty. So I said, why don't I just give it to all my publishing houses around the world? So we did that. So the first publishing house was in Italy. They said, can we translate it? How much does it cost? And I said, I'll give it to you free of charge. You just go with it. And I think they're selling the book for €1 or €2 on Amazon right now. So it went out in Italian. It was printed in its entirety in the largest newspaper in Italy. And then it went to Turkey, and then went to across the world. So did I earn any money on it? No. But it started up a conversation. It was another way of networking, right? Perhaps a little bit more scalable, perhaps not as personal as what you're doing, but it certainly sparked a conversation and maintained me both emotionally, but also as a brand at the same time. So I think that's the backstory, if it makes sense, right?
I love that, Martin. And you raise a really important point that I think a lot of people miss, which is that they assume that networking has to be this, very intensive, oh, let me have a coffee date with you, which of course is not scalable. It's great for meeting key contacts, but you can't do that with everyone. No. But content creation actually is itself a form of networking. It's a way of getting people to know who you are and to be more receptive to your message. So I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely. And I want to just build on what a couple of people are saying here. So I can see that Tina is saying, always bring an unexpected gift, i.e. a good idea, a question, or an advice. I've learned one thing on this advice, I have to say, Tina, that is sometimes I'm giving too much advice and people think it's really, oh, here he goes again with another piece of advice. Am I not good enough yet, right? Just want to warn you on that one, right? And then people are saying here, this is Carsten, he's saying, networking tips, listen, show interest, be present with the person. I think that's exactly what you're saying, Dorie. I just want to come back to your 3 points of advice here. So networking was the last one, but you also have 2 other ones. One is content creation and one is social proof. Content creation is a little bit what we talked about here. Is that right? But what about social proof? What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, of course, what you're referring to, Martin, is my recognized expert framework that I created, which is kind of based on principles that I talked about in this book, Stand Out. And basically, what I have come to understand, I've spent the past decade really understanding what can make someone a thought leader in their company or in their field. What is it that will get someone's ideas recognized and listened to and heard? And what I've come to discover is that social proof is a key component of it. Essentially, social proof, you can use this term to sort of translate in your mind. It is credibility. What is the credibility that you are demonstrating and manifesting? Because the truth is, especially now, we are in this crowded, noisy world. And so it's much easier, of course, for people to tune out information. If they've already heard of you, if you already have a good reputation, they'll be like, oh, well, I like that Martin Lindstrom. I read his last book. Let's see what he has to say. But if they've never heard of you, it's a lot easier to just say, oh, I can't deal with it, as compared to taking the time to figure it out. Is Martin Lindstrom credible? And so one of the very best things we can do to make it more likely that our ideas will be listened to and heard is to basically marry ourselves to forms of credibility that other people already know and have heard of. This is why authors will have quotes from other authors on their books. It's being affiliated with a university. It's being quoted in publications. It's mentioning honors. I know your new book, The Ministry of Common Sense, is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. When people see that, they say, oh, well, that must be good. It's pretty popular. If enough people bought it, okay, I'll buy that too. So social proof really matters.
Is social proof what you're doing? Because I know you have your own learning series on LinkedIn. And is it the Newsweek Alliance you also created? Is that what you mean when you talk about social proof?
Yeah, it's basically how can you attach yourself and build alliances and liaisons with brands that are already trusted. It really is helpful. So you're exactly right. Every Thursday at noon Eastern, I do an interview show for Newsweek, and I've been doing it since last summer. And it is quite powerful because people might not have necessarily heard of me, but if I reach out and say, hey, I run an interview show for Newsweek, would you like to be on it? They've heard of Newsweek, and they're far more likely to say, yeah, sure, I'll come on. And it creates a positive self-reinforcing mechanism because, of course, after they do the interview, they've heard of me.
But Dorie, that's very easy to say. Not everyone can knock on the door to Newsweek or LinkedIn and be recognized and become a fixed stable there. And you are a journalist by background, so you have the skills. What do I do if I'm sitting in company X and you know what? I just posted an article I thought was great on LinkedIn and it has 69 people viewing it. There's a far cry from that level to what you're talking about now.
You're 100% right, Martin. But it's all about the ladder strategy of just successively laddering up. When I first started my business, it's the same strategy, just on a smaller scale. The things that I was proudest of, the things that I put into my bio. Martin, did you know that I am the 2008 winner of the Somerville, Massachusetts Small Business of the Year Award? Now I have other social proof that is perhaps more salient to a global audience. So, that's what I lead with. But I was so proud, and it was truly helpful to me at the time. Oh my God, I won the 2008 Small Business of the Year Award in my town. That's what you start with. Or I wrote, Dorie Clark has contributed to publications including Mass Inc. Well, have you heard of Mass Inc? If you don't live in Boston, probably not. But within the sphere that I was operating in then, it was helpful. So you take the social proof that is relevant and accessible to you, and you leverage that, and you keep using it to ladder up to bigger and bigger and more prominent publications and affiliations.
Well said. I just want to say what Linda is saying. Linda says, by asking questions or helping in small ways, we can learn what would be genuinely useful to our community and potential prospects. This approach can lead to more meaningful conversations. And she's so right. And I think the issue we have right now is that there is so much content out there. Do you feel having your own personal brand that is under severe pressure at the moment? Because it's almost like the net is packed with stuff. So being heard or cutting through the clutter is a challenge.
Yeah, it's certainly something that dissuades a lot of people from even trying to begin with, right? As they say, oh, well, why would I bother? I wrote the blog post and I got, 4 people reading it, or, I did whatever and there wasn't a response. And so actually, as a result of that, this is really in many ways, Martin, the topic of my forthcoming book. I have a book coming out September 21st of this year called The Long Game. Thank you. I'm very excited about it. But I really wrote that book in many ways because of seeing the folks that I speak to and interact with, coaching clients, members of my recognized expert community. And Linda actually is one of them. So Linda, good to see you here. Good. It's great to welcome you. But so often I would hear this, frustration from people, and I empathize so much because I have been there and I have felt it. When I was first starting my business, it's just, this painstaking process. No one's really listening or paying attention. Is this ever going to pay off? And so the long game is really an answer to that. It is providing a series of strategies that people can use, because we know when we believe contradictory things. Everybody knows that things don't happen overnight. And yet also they try something once and then they're just like, oh, well, this sucks, I'm going to stop. And so the question is, how do you navigate that gap? How do you get from I tried it once to I did it enough to succeed? That is an incredibly hard and sometimes depressing trough to go through. And I want to provide people with strategies so they actually can do that and do things long enough so that they truly can persevere and be successful.
It's fascinating because one person said to me once, when you run an advertising campaign, it's first when you get sick and tired of it, it starts to work out there. And it's a little bit what we're talking about here. I just want to say, Dorie, thank you so much for joining me. How do people get hold of you? And just rename those. No, you have 3 books coming out. Just say those titles one more time so everyone can recognize them and hopefully buy them.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Martin. I appreciate it. My new book that's going to be coming out, look for it in September. It's called The Long Game, How to Be a Long-Term Thinker in a Short-Term World. And I'll just mention, because we've spent some time talking about it, if folks want to learn more about my work or get in touch, one of the very best ways to do it, I have a free resource called the Recognized Expert Evaluation. And it's a free tool. It's actually a scored self-assessment that helps you think through where you're strong and where you're weakest in being a recognized expert so that you can work on those things. And anyone can get it for free at dorieclark.com/toolkit.
And we would post that as well on the lines popping up next to your screen right now. Dorie, amazing to spend time with you as always. And for everyone listening and watching, Dorie is real. What you're seeing is exactly what you will get, which is what making her such a amazing individual. Thanks for joining me. And I just want to join you guys by saying one last thing. That is that tomorrow I'm going to be meeting up with Laura Gassner-Otting. And if you don't know Laura, then let me just play a little video for her so you can get a sense of who Laura is. Here she is.
Spent 20 years doing executive search for people who are at the very top of their game. And they were super successful, which is why I was talking to them as a headhunter. They weren't always happy, which is why they were talking to me.
I guess that's Laura. So tomorrow at 6 p.m., we're going to catch up with Laura. That is 6 p.m. Central European time. It's 12 noon Eastern, and it's 9 a.m. Pacific time. In the meantime, I'm going to let you go. What Dorie said to me today, do you know what? It's common sense. The idea of that we have to be focused and develop a piece of content which makes us stand out. The idea we have to have social proof, ensuring that other people are endorsing us, makes sense. And the idea of spreading the word through the network, In fact, it's common sense. Sadly, I'll only say one thing. Common sense is not that common. See you tomorrow. Bye for now.